What happens when someone with absolutely nothing stands up to someone who has everything? And what would you do if you witnessed a moment so shocking it made an entire room fall silent? This story will honestly leave you speechless, and by the end, you'll understand why sometimes the quietest people create the loudest transformations. Picture this. You're in the most lavish dining room you've ever seen. Crystal chandeliers casting golden light across marble floors, the gentle clink of expensive silverware, and conversations about deals worth millions floating through the air. It's the kind of place where money talks and everyone else whispers. But sometimes, in the most unlikely settings, the most extraordinary things happen. Now, imagine being 20-something, skint, and utterly invisible in a world that treats you like furniture. That was Sarah's reality. And before you think this is just another Rag Sturch's fairy tale, let me tell you what happened next was far more powerful than any lottery win could ever be. Sarah wasn't born into privilege. Far from it, actually. She grew up in a tiny flat with her mom, who worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. When her mom passed away, and I'm talking about the kind of loss that leaves you completely adrift, Sarah found herself drowning in debt with nowhere to turn, so she did what millions of us would do. She swallowed her pride and took whatever work she could find. That's how she ended up working for the Wellington family. And blimey, these people had more money than sense. The kind of wealth that makes you wonder if they VA'd ever had to check their bank balance before buying something. The patriarch, James Wellington, had built his empire from scratch, which you'd think would make him appreciate hard work. His son Marcus, though? Well, that's where things get interesting. Marcus was everything you'd expect from someone who'd never heard the word no. Handsome, charming when it suited him, and absolutely convinced that the world existed for his entertainment. To him, the staff weren't people. They were props in his little theater of privilege. And Sarah, she was his favorite target. Months, Sarah endured his snide comments, his dismissive looks, the way he'd make her redo perfectly good work just because he could. She never complained, never fought back, never even met his eyes when he spoke to her. Why would she? She needed this job like she needed air to breathe. But here's the thing about staying silent for too long. Eventually, something's gotta give. The night everything changed started like any other posh dinner party. Politicians schmoozing with business moguls, champagne flowing like water, and enough diamonds in one room to fund a small country. Sarah moved between the guests like a ghost, filling glasses and clearing plates, desperately trying to blend into the wallpaper. Marcus was holding court with his uni mates, the kind of lads who think cruelty is clever and humiliation is hilarious. They'd been eyeing Sarah all evening, whispering among themselves like schoolboys planning mischief. And Sarah could feel it, that prickle of dread when you know someone's about to make you the punchline of their joke. As she passed by their table, carrying a tray of empty glasses, Marcus reached out. At first, it seemed like he was just being playful, tugging at her sleeve to get her attention. But then his grip tightened, and with one sharp yank, he tore her uniform right at the shoulder. The sound of ripping fabric cut through the room like a knife. Time stopped. Conversations died mid-sentence. The clink of cutlery ceased. And every single person in that dining room turned to stare at Sarah, standing there with her torn uniform, now her face burning with humiliation, tears threatening to spill over. Now here's where most people expected the story to end. Poor girl gets embarrassed, rich boy gets a slap on the wrist, life goes on. But sometimes, the universe has other plans. James Wellington, the millionaire father who'd built his fortune through sheer determination, slowly rose from his seat. And when I say slowly, I mean like a volcano building pressure before it erupts. The man's face went from confusion to disbelief to absolutely furious in the space of about 3 seconds. The silence in that room was deafening. Could have heard a pin drop on the Persian rug. Marcus, still grinning like the absolute melt he was, looked around expecting his mates to laugh. Instead, he found himself staring into his father's eyes. And for the first time in his privileged life, he saw something that genuinely scared him. Disappointment so profound it was practically radioactive. "What?" James said, his voice so quiet it was terrifying. "Do you think you're doing?" Sarah stood there, clutching the torn fabric to her chest, tears streaming down her face. But these weren't just tears of embarrassment. They were years of suppressed pain, finally finding their way out. Every time she'd been ignored, dismissed, treated like she didn't matter, it all came flooding out in that moment. Marcus tried to laugh it off. "Come on, Dad. It's just a bit of fun. She knows I'm only messing about." But nobody was laughing. The guests looked horrified. His mates suddenly found their shoes fascinating. Even the waitstaff had stopped what they were doing to watch this car crash unfold. That's when James Wellington did something that shocked everyone in that room, including himself. He walked over to Sarah, gently placed his dinner jacket around her shoulders, and said, "I am so terribly sorry this happened in my home." But it wasn't just an apology, it was a declaration. This man, who could buy and sell most people in that room, was publicly acknowledging that his son had crossed a line that money couldn't uncross. And the fury in his voice could have melted steel. "You will apologize. Right now, in front of everyone." Marcus, his face now pale as his shirt, mumbled something that might have been an apology if you squinted your ears just right. But his father wasn't having it. "Not good enough," James said. "Try again, like you mean it." The room watched as this entitled young man, who'd never faced consequences for anything in his life, struggled to find words that carried actual remorse. And Sarah, still trembling, looked up at him for the first time with something other than fear in her eyes. "I'm sorry," Marcus said, and for once he actually meant it. "I'm truly sorry. That was unforgivable." But James wasn't finished. He turned to address the entire room, his voice carrying the kind of authority that comes from earning respect rather than demanding it. "This young woman," he said, gesturing to Sarah, "works harder in one day than most of us work in a week. She deserves better than this. It's better than all of us, frankly." Then he did something that left everyone gobsmacked. He offered Sarah a proper position in his company, not as domestic staff, but as a trainee in his business operations. Full salary, education support, the works. Right there, in front of God and everyone. Sarah stared at him like he'd just spoken in ancient Greek. "Sir, I don't understand." "You don't need to understand," James replied. "You just need to say yes." Here's the beautiful part she did. This woman who'd spent months being invisible finally stepped into the light. The dinner party ended pretty quickly after that. Guests made their excuses and shuffled out, probably eager to escape the awkwardness. But something had shifted in that house, something fundamental and irreversible.
Over the following weeks,
Sarah threw herself into her new role with the kind of determination that only comes from having been given a second chance. She studied, learned, grew stronger every day. The frightened girl in the torn uniform began to disappear, replaced by a confident young woman who'd found her voice. As for Marcus, well, that night marked the beginning of what you might call his education in being an actual human being. Watching Sarah transform from someone he detormented into someone he genuinely respected was like looking in a mirror and not liking what he saw. He started volunteering at local charities, began treating staff like people rather than furniture, slowly earning back the respect he'd thrown away. His father, meanwhile, discovered something he'd forgotten in his climb to the top: that true wealth is unmeasured in bank accounts, but in the lives you touch and the dignity you preserve. But the most remarkable transformation was Sarah herself. The woman who'd once tried to disappear into the walls now walked with her head high. She'd learned something invaluable. That respect is unsomething you have to earn through suffering. It's something you reborn deserving. The torn uniform became a symbol, not of humiliation, but of the moment when silence finally found its voice. Because sometimes it takes witnessing someone's lowest moment to recognize their incredible strength. This story teaches us something crucial about power and privilege. Real strength isn't about tearing others down to build yourself up. It's about recognizing the humanity in everyone, regardless of their circumstances. It is about understanding that how we treat the people who can do nothing for us reveals everything about who we really are. Sarah's story reminds us that dignity isn't a luxury item, it's a human right. And sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stand up and say, "This isn't right," to change everything. The next time you see someone being treated poorly, remember this story. Remember that your voice, your actions, your choice to stand up for what's right can be the turning point in someone else's life. Because we all have the power to be someone's James Wellington, someone's moment of hope when everything seems hopeless. If this story moved you, if it made you think about how you treat the people around you, Then smash that like button and let me know in the comments what you thought. Have you ever witnessed a moment that completely changed how you saw the world? I'd love to hear your stories. And if you want more tales about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, then hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Because trust me, we've got plenty more stories that'll restore your faith in humanity.